Chapter 26, Nature is a Feedback System. Natural selection is the idea that organisms best suited to their environment are more likely to reproduce. Natural selection happens every day. If you've ever taken antibiotics, there was some natural selection going on inside of you. The bacteria were getting massacred. They found themselves in an environment that they couldn't survive. But what if you stop taking your antibiotics too early? You may still feel better. Your immune system may be strong enough to get rid of the remaining bacteria, but not before those bacteria multiplied and spread elsewhere. Those bacteria that survived just so happened to have a higher tolerance towards antibiotics. They were brought to the brink of death, but they still had time to split off into new bacterial cells. Maybe you gave someone a hug. Those new cells spread. The other person gets sick, except this time, all of the new population of bacteria are more resistant to antibiotics. Scientists are calling these new guys superbacteria. Random mutation occurs a lot too. Once again, this is something we see every day. Every flu season, scientists have to try and come up with a new flu vaccine. Why? Viruses change. They change quickly. That's part of the reason why flu vaccines don't have that great of a success rate, albeit they can be useful to fight against a significant portion of the flu virus population every flu season. Random mutations could be bad, good, or have no effect at all. They just happen. With millions of miles of DNA in every creature, it's no wonder more variations and mistakes don't happen as often as they do. Natural selection isn't rocket science. What lives will live and what dies will die. Every living thing is different from another. Remember how every child is genetically diversified from their parents? Generation after generation, our varying physical attributes continue to change within the population because of this process. There is a process called artificial selection. Every breed of dog came from the wolf. Humans made that happen. We started to breed the dogs that had the attributes that we liked. If we liked hunting dogs, we would only let the best hunters reproduce. If we liked the cutest dogs, we would only let those reproduce. Nature took care of the rest. Dogs Decoded, conducted by Nova, is a documentary that had something to say about how dogs became domesticated over the years. When we look at someone's face, we tend to look to the left, the other person's right face, whether we realize it or not. We are trying to read their true intentions, thoughts, and emotions when this happens. Researchers decided it would be a good idea to see if dogs looked towards the left too. Dogs were shown pictures of inanimate objects, other dogs, and human faces. Pictures of inanimate objects and other dogs resulted in random focus of the eyes. However, it was clear that dogs tended to look to the left, just like humans do, when they were shown a picture of a human face. No other species interacts with humans this way. Do humans understand dogs? For many years, the scientific community believed that barking did not encode any information. They were just random sounds. After all, wolves in the wild only bark as a warning. How could it be possible for dogs to form a language just for humans? Researchers made recordings of dogs barking and let humans listen to the barks. Participants were then asked to identify what the dog was trying to say. The results were clear. Humans are particularly adept at identifying anger, loneliness, excitement, playfulness, and a few other situational barks. But the truly bizarre issue here is how dogs develop their communication skills on a relatively short time scale. It gets weirder. Researchers in Siberia started breeding wild foxes in 1959. They found that out of all the foxes they gathered at first, only 1% of them were not aggressive or scared. They took the 1% of the tame ones and started to breed them. Every generation, that process would be repeated. Only the tamest foxes were allowed to breed. By the third generation, the aggression and fear started to disappear. During the eighth generation, magic happened. Foxes started to show affection towards humans. The cubs just opened up their eyes and started loving us. As their behavior changed, so did their physical appearance. Their eyes became floppier, their coats started to change color. Their tails started to curl instead of being straight. Their limbs and tails grew shorter. In short, they appeared to be more adorable. Why would all of this happen? None of the original foxes exhibited these physical traits outright, and yet after only a few generations, these wild foxes underwent a significant physical change. The information for all of those physical changes surely lies in the DNA. That's how structures for our anatomy get coded. Natural and artificial selection are one thing, random mutation is another thing, but this quick shift to be more adorable to humans seems eerie. After all, pet dogs number in the hundreds of millions, while some wolves are considered to be an endangered species. Their cuteness and tameness were better suited to their environment. Along these same lines, there is an even larger puzzle to solve in biology as a whole. Life is far too structurally complicated for random chance to have brought us this far. Nassim Haramein does a good job of putting the problem into perspective with an example that involves a Rubik's Cube. You blindfold someone. You hand them a Rubik's Cube. They make one move per second on the cube. Haramein said that after you do the math on it, it would take a massive 100 billion years for a person to solve a cube with no feedback. Instead, if you give that person a morsel of information, then the solution time changes dramatically. Let's say you told the blindfolded person that they are either getting closer to the solution or they are getting farther away. They get a 1 or a 0, so it's just a simple binary feedback. If they're making one move a second, the solution time drops from 100 billion years to just 7 minutes. But a Rubik's Cube is just a Rubik's Cube. It only has 54 distinct panels to it. We are humans. We are made up of trillions of cells with millions of miles of DNA. Supposedly, even the most extreme estimates only have life starting a little less than 4 billion years ago. Do you see the discrepancy here? It is reasonable to believe in the possibility that there is information being processed beyond the basic natural selection process I mentioned earlier. It is the same feedback system that allowed the foxes to change drastically in just a few generations. Think about feedback in a business. Most of us have seen the questionnaires or customer service rating forums where we tell a business how good they did. That feedback is critical for shaping the course of action of any business. Imagine if a business owner didn't know if they were making money every day. Not having that feedback would be crippling. Of course, the end result of never making money is going out of business. That would be tantamount to death in the natural selection process. Humans have a few more tools in their toolbox to keep a business alive. They can plan, they can think, they can learn new skills to do more tasks. From what I hear, keeping a business alive is hard. The odds are not just in your favor. The free market could destroy you even if you gave your best effort. Are you running a shipping company? Great. One day a hurricane wipes out a third of your fleet at sea. Your business model becomes unsustainable. You go out of business. Think about how a business would function with zero feedback. You just showed up to the shop every day and did your duty. You don't even know if people like your service or product. You don't know if you're making money. You just work. Considering how ruthless the universe can be to a business, I would say you won't be working for long. Feedback isn't just a nice thing to have, it's a need. You're trying to survive in a dynamic, complex environment. Haramein proposes a novel solution to how this feedback system may work. Remember the energy that still exists in space, even at absolute zero? If energy exists, it has a structure. Since we perceive that energy to be a vacuum, it just looks like empty space to us. Our senses are limited. We can't detect every mechanical process that actually takes place around us. The idea of emptiness being full might be counterintuitive to us because of our psychophysical limitations. It would make sense that the structure of the vacuum would have to be symmetrical and as stable as physically possible. Otherwise, it wouldn't appear as empty and seamless as it actually does. There are certain shapes in geometry that are more stable than any other shape. For example, the tetrahedron is an extremely stable shape. Think of the oldest structure on the planet. Pyramids have been around so long because they have a tetrahedron shape, and thus they are going to stand the test of time longer than most other structures. When you are consummated, you start out as one cell. Then you split into 2 cells. When those 2 split into 4 cells, they form a tetrahedron, not a cube. Our bodies are built with a bias towards structural integrity. Haramein was able to generate one of the few possible 3-dimensional fractals known in geometry. It is symmetrical. It is in vector equilibrium. That means that no outside force would be able to destabilize it. Once you draw out this 3D fractal structure, it is composed of 64 tetrahedrons. That tiny oscillation at absolute zero could be thought of these tetrahedrons pulsing. All 64 tetrahedrons reach out as far as they can so that the furthest tip of any tetrahedron will only be 1 Planck length away from the other tetrahedron tip on the opposite side of the fractal structure. Then those points will retract and return to the center of the fractal structure only to expand back out. When those 64 points return to the center, there is an exchange of information. Basically, each point is telling the other points what they have seen. This happens over and over and over again. Ermine says that this has been happening since the beginning of time, since space has been the one key thing that seems to unite everything. This pulse is a cycle. This pulse is feedback. If what Hermine is saying is true, it would mean that the universe is already its own giant feedback system. Nature is built upon this system, and we mimic it as well since we emerged from nature. We go to sleep and we wake up. We listen and we speak, sometimes not in that order. I go out to interact with others and I reflect on those interactions in my alone time. There is this constant feedback going on, not just in our lives, not just in business, not just in natural selection, but also in the very fabric of space itself. This phenomenon may be what generates consciousness. What is consciousness but a constant, dense field of feedback? Whether it's a business failure or success, a grade in school, someone chewing you out because you really messed something up, or nature skinning your knees because you weren't paying enough attention while riding your bike, you are always being updated on the consequences of your behavior. No one else can listen to your feedback for you. Feedback can be offered to you. Whether you integrate feedback into your life or not will shape the quality of your life. Always look for feedback. Become more conscious. Forget ignorance. Feedback is bliss.